On behalf of the Green Left think tank, I warmly welcome all participants to the 11th seminar. We are truly grateful to our keynote speaker, Professor Gilbert Achcar, for kindly accepting our invitation to share his insights with us. I would also like to extend my thanks to Dr. Saeed Rahnema, to Dr. Behboud Tui, and Mr. Mehdi Fattahu for joining this lecture and contributing to today's discussion. The title of today's lecture is Capitalism, Neofascism, and the Struggle for Socialism in the 21st Century. Gilbert Achcar, a professor at SOAS in London, argues the contemporary capitalism in facing chronic structural crises, including economic stagnation, widening inequality, environmental collapse, and geopolitical instability. These dynamics weaken the ability of liberal democratic capitalism to sustain itself and open the door to authoritarian and reactionary forces. He interprets the rise of neofascism such as a triumphism. I cannot explain to pronounce it, in the US, far-right movement in Europe, Bolsonarism in Brazil, and similar trends in the Middle East and India, as political reactions to those crises and the failure of liberal elites. Although distinct from classical fascism, these movements share key features: extreme nationalism, right-wing populism, xenophobia, Islamophobia. Sorry, some of the microphones are open. Please close them. Islamophobia, authoritarian policies, and close ties with big capital. For Achcar, the way forward lies in revitalizing the socialist project, grounded in radical democracy, social justice, and a credible alternative to both neoliberalism and bureaucratic socialism of the 20th century. He insists that resistance must be global, linking a struggle in the Middle East, Latin America, and Europe, since both crisis-ridden capitalism and neofascism are global phenomena requiring international solidarity. Gilbert Achcar is Emeritus Professor of Development Studies and International Relations at SOAS University of London, born in Senegal in 1951 and raised in Lebanon. He studied at the Lebanese universities and University Lyon II, and completed a PhD in Social History International Relations at University Paris 8. He has taught and conducted research in Beirut, Paris, and Berlin before joining SOAS in 2007. Achcar is the author of numerous influential books. His notable books include The Clash of Barbarism, Perilous Power with Noam Chomsky, The Arabs and the Holocaust, The People Want, The New Cold War, and The Gaza Catastrophe. Some books, including The Clash of Barbarism and The People War, have been translated into Farsi. The microphone is yours to begin your lecture. I have one question, one big question. I can start with that. If you rather or not, you can start with anything in your mind, and friends can just contribute to more questions. I just want to know if you believe capitalism it still has the structural capacity to reform itself, or is it inevitably heading towards the deeper crisis? What is your opinion on that? If you can just start on this and go ahead. Microphone is yours.
Okay. First of all, greetings to all, and thank you for the introduction, the presentation, and and thank you for the invitation and the opportunity to discuss with you and the attendees about the ability of capitalism to reform. I mean, capitalism is, of course, a very flexible system. And we have seen capitalism go through various forms, quite different forms, one should say, since the 19th century until today. And I'm not one of those who would announce every now and then the crisis and the final crisis and terminal crisis. I don't think there is such prospect. And I think it was Lenin who said that, well, capitalism will not fall unless you push it down. You give it what it takes, the impulsion to fall. And I don't see in today's world the forces that are able to really lead a radical change of society and the economy at the global level. I mean, there was such a prospect, one could believe in such a prospect in the 20th century, even in the late 19th century, with the emerging force of social democracy, what became the Second International, and then the communist movement in the 20th century. But since then, since the late 20th century, the forces of the left have been very much weakened, and the collapse of the Soviet Union was a heavy blow for the very idea of socialism. I mean, even though I've never equated the Soviet Union with socialism, but in the mind of most of humanity, that was the embodiment of socialism. And the collapse of that was a terrible blow to the very idea. And the neoliberal transformation and offensive in capitalism, and that's one of those metamorphosis of capitalism. The neoliberal transformation went along with a severe and heavy onslaught on the labor movement, and therefore also on the social basis of what constituted the political left. And the end result of that has been, as I said, a major weakening. So even though we have here and there reasons for hope with the rise of new forms of radicalization, you can see that there is a potential very clearly. You see it in France with the La France Insoumise, the movement there, which is quite sizable and quite radical. You see it with the potential around Jeremy Corbyn and those who left the Labour Party, split from the Labour Party or were expelled because of left-wing positions, and they represent a huge force. Recently, you had a call for a new party of the left, and close to 800,000 people joined that call, even though it is now in crisis, but that's a different story. So we can see potential. You see it with also the Zohran Mamdani campaign in New York, of course. So there are potentials, but certainly not anything yet in a position of strength that would represent a real challenge for the capitalist system. And that's why, the issue is not reforming itself. Capitalism may undergo new crises, and it will definitely. Crisis is built in the very nature of capitalism, but that's also if you want, the price, the cost of its flexibility. It is because it is such a flexible kind of system. So it's not something that is planned and centrally organized. So that's why it goes into crisis and crisis. But it is able to adapt and to change and to reform itself. And these crises may lead even to wars and such big traumatic changes in history. But I mean, as long as the capitalist system have not been brought down by anti-capitalist forces, it will remain there.
Can I continue with another question to Professor Achcar?
Yeah, it's Rosa? A conversation anyway.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, because Rosa is the head of the meeting, so I must ask her in the first. Yeah? Is it okay?
I'm sorry. Who is asking the questions? Because I cannot read your name.
Yeah. Thank you, Gilbert, for being with us. And my question is about the position of your... I have read the book from 2013 about the religion, Marxism, and cosmopolitanism. And there you distinguish between the two kinds of religion. The first one is the Christian, which you name it more progressive in the Latin America and so on. And the second is the Islamic fundamentalism. And I wanted to ask you if it's possible to explain more about the Islam and its role in this political field of societies like ours.
The text that you are referring to is actually a reply to those, and there are quite a few of them, who on the left supported Islamic fundamentalist organizations, including Khomeinism, by the way, by equating Islamic fundamentalism with the Christian theology of liberation. The theology of liberation, which is, as you know, is a left-wing and parts of it even radical left movement linked to the churches, mostly strong, at least it used to be strong, even if it's much weaker today, as part of the general weakening of the left. But it used to be strong in Latin America and, for instance, in a country like Brazil. This theology of liberation, the radical left Christian movement, was linked to the peasant movement in that country, and represented a major component of the left that created the Workers' Party in Brazil in the 80s, late 80s. It was in Salvador, it was in other places. You will find them in guerrillas, in armed struggle, linked to the left. And so you had some people in the Western left and in the Middle Eastern left and in our Muslim majority countries, some people on the left, in order to explain or justify their support to Islamic fundamentalist forces, equated them with the theology of liberation, the Christian theology of liberation. And of course, as you know better than I know, that you had with Ali Shariati some attempts at creating a theology of liberation, and you had some currents who tried to mix Islam and Marxism, best known among them as they used to be in the past. Today they are completely degenerate, but the Mujahideen Khalq, for instance. So you've had such things, but to believe that Khomeinism, that Hezbollah in Lebanon, for instance, that Hamas, that the Muslim Brotherhood, and all these currents, which are very conservative socially and culturally, to believe that such currents are left-wing, are progressive currents, is to read things completely in reverse, right? And there is a huge difference, of course, between theology of liberation, whether it is Christian or any religion, if you want. You can try to elaborate theology of liberation in any religion. It's a matter of interpretation. It's a matter of finding in the religion this or that aspect that can be interpreted in a left-wing direction, and try to make of that a full-fledged ideology. There have been attempts like this. I explain why this attempt was more successful in Christianity than it has been in Islam until now. And that goes to the roots of both religions, in the sense that the original message of Christianity, the one that you have in the Gospels, is about a religion of the oppressed, and whose founder dies, crucified, right? And so you have a message which is relatively easy for from a left-wing perspective, to accommodate to modern left-wing views. And you have sayings on the women, on the poor, on other things that are, easy to accommodate in a left-wing perspective. It doesn't mean that this flows naturally, because, as we know, in most of history and until now, the Christian religion, like other religions, has been used for fundamentally reactionary conservative purposes and interpreted in a fundamentally reactionary way. But what I'm saying is that if you want to elaborate a left-wing interpretation, it's relatively easy. It's much more difficult when it comes to Islam, which has been, from the time of its founder, a state, which has been in government. And therefore, when Christian left-wingers say we want to go back to original Christianity as a religion of the poor and oppressed, you can't have the same message really in Islam, unless you just forget the whole period when Islam turned into a religion of state and of power. You would stick just to the first period when it was still a minority and oppressed, very early stages of the history. And so the issue is that those who say we want to go back to the origin and we want to apply the system that prevailed in the origin, we want to apply the constitution of the origin. The Quran is our constitution. The Sharia is our... those cannot be left-wing. Because by definition, when you want to apply a system of laws and a system of power that existed many centuries ago, 1,500 years ago, then this can, by definition, this is reactionary. Anyone saying, I want to go back to a system that is so old in history, can only lead to reactionary understandings. And of course, some of them take horrendous proportion, like with the ISIS, the Islamic State, wanting to rebuild the caliphate and to imitate, as they pretended, the ancient Islam, and they end up into a horror which has nothing to do, of course, with what original Islam was. Original Islam, which had progressive features in its time, but when you take it, the same system, and apply it today, of course, it is completely inappropriate for our present time and society. So that's what I explained, that Islamic fundamentalism is like every fundamentalism, like Catholic fundamentalism, I mean, if you say, like Christian fundamentalism, whether Catholic or Protestant, Islamic fundamentalism, whether Sunni or Shia, Hindu fundamentalism, Jewish fundamentalism, any fundamentalism, all religious fundamentalism are by definition reactionary. They are reactionary ideologies and have to be dealt with as reactionary ideologies. This does not prevent one from making a difference between a fundamentalist movement which is ruling a country in power, like the Taliban in Afghanistan or the Khomeini's regime in Iran, and between forces that are fundamentalist, but they are in a position of fighting against a colonial power or an occupation, as was the case with Hezbollah in Lebanon. That's, I mean, your position depends on the moment in which, or the kind of struggle in which, or towards which you are looking. But still, whatever the case, on the social, economic, cultural ground, you are on the opposite side of these movements, even if, as in the case of Hezbollah in Lebanon under the Israeli occupation, even if you could be on the same side in the fight against the occupation, you were not on the same side politically about local politics, domestic politics, social issues, cultural issues, and the rest. So that was the point. That was the point here to make. To warn against those illusions that, and you had a lot of illusions, you know better than I know, but we all, I mean, given the age, I know the period when at the beginning of Khomeinism, you know, you had a lot of people from the left who became Khomeinists because, that's the popular revolution, that's the people, they had the strongest possible illusions about the unfolding regime. And that was tragic because in some cases this led to tragedies. And as you know very well in the history of Iran's left. Yes, I mean, we have to be I think very clear about religious fundamentalism and know that this is not any progressive response to the problems that humanity is facing, but a reactionary, very reactionary response, which is to be fought ideologically and fought politically.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mehdi.
My question is another subject. Dr. Betwy, when you will go on about this subject, I say later, but I want to change the subject. No problem, Dr. Betwy?
No, please, go ahead.
Today's discussion is about neofascism and the current state of the world. But I wanted to raise a question about an earlier stage. Since the way we view the past decade is directly connected to the current debate. I am raising a question about globalization in the light of your articles and your writings. You mentioned in your remarks there have been major global shifts in the world in the last decades. One of the most significant changes is the rise of several countries in the global south, such as China, India, South Korea, Brazil, and go on and so on. On the other hand, in your analysis, you tend to interpret overall policies and global trends since World War II within a consistent framework. How can you explain those changes within a single framework? Why didn't even one country from the global south grow in this extent before the era of globalization? Do these changes not conflict with analyzing the dominant global policies within a single framework? And isn't it necessary to distinguish the processing characterizing the era of globalization from those of a pre-globalization period, considering them as two distinct periods? Naturally, like all the periodization, they share certain common features.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I hope I understood your question, so I will reply to what I understood anyway, and you'll tell me if that's that fits the bill, if you want. I think the issue is not. I mean, the issue in the global system for the global south, as we're saying, is a matter of ability to grow under conditions of imperialist domination. And the capitalist system, early on, as we know, it grew and reached the industrialized stage in Europe, in European countries, spread through European colonies, and you had the build-up of a system of domination, of global domination, with two tiers at least. One being the what today we call the global north, but this is modern terminology, referring to indeed to what you could also call the white capitalist core countries dominating the rest. And under that domination, it was very difficult for countries from the global south to move up the ladder. That was the case, I mean, until you had decolonization, which freed relatively those states from direct domination, but indirect domination remained. And the end result is that the only countries of the global south that managed to climb the ladder are countries with specific conditions. I mean, if you take it in terms of white core capitalism, Japan is already an exception because it's the first major capitalist country which is not a white country, but that was due to its insularity, to the fact that it remained free from direct colonialism, and therefore managed to catch up. Then, if you take later on which countries managed to climb the ladder, the economic ladder, you will find that there are specific countries which actually were helped by imperialism, like South Korea or Taiwan, because they were in the forefront against, between quote marks, communism, against China. Now, the most spectacular instance of a country from the global south climbing that ladder, is China, of course. But China again is an exceptional case, because it is, even though it inserted itself in globalization, you mentioned globalization, it did it under its own condition and in a system which is dominated by the state, a developmentalist state, what we call in development studies developmentalism, which here we're not speaking of democracy. Of course, it's not a democratic state, but it's even though it's a bureaucratic authoritarian state, it is a developmentalist one. That it is one which regards as its priority creating the conditions for economic development. And this the Chinese managed to do very successly. I mean, in the sense of economic development, of course. It has been a spectacular, and it is still spectacular. The rise of China economically is spectacular. And very spectacular is also it's now proceeding to becoming, I mean, one of the edge technology states in the world. It's more and more up to the highest level technologically that you find within the capitalist world, and it is making important strides in domains like, for instance, electric vehicles and solar panels and the rest. I mean, it is developing means for the future. If we think of the future as a future without fossil fuels, well, China is ahead of most countries in this, in the creation of the means for that, and in the use of the means for that. So yeah, I mean, it's not, I mean, globalization in itself. Actually, I mean, I don't see globalization as having changed the conditions of the game. On the contrary, globalization as going along with neoliberalism made it more difficult again to see the kind of development that you had in the period preceding globalization. That is, after the Second World War, you had this period of 30 years where you had in the global north you had Keynesianism, and in the global south you had in many countries developmentalism, helped by the Soviet Union as a counterweight to the United States and the Western system. So that created a space for some countries of the global south to try to progress. Globalization, the neoliberal change, the use of the debt that was crucial in the shift to neoliberalism in the global south, the use of the debt mechanism and the rest, these made the conditions again quite difficult. So you had some countries developing as part of the global market by inserting themselves in the global market, but without really being able to raise through the ceiling. You had a ceiling between this global north and the rest. And China managed to do it in the time of globalization, despite this, because of the specific conditions in which the country joined this world market in the time of globalization. So that's quite specific. That shows actually China is a counterexample for neoliberalism, in the sense that as a success story economically, it proves that it's not through the neoliberal model that you can go through, but something quite different through developmentalist policies, even if they are inserted in or trying to play by the rules of the world free market game globally. Yeah, so basically that's how I see it. I hope that I have answered your question or your remark.
Yes, you have answered, but one aspect is remained. And I mean that after World War II, we have 45 years during which no country in the global south experienced significant growth. But in the last 30 years after that, from 1990 until now or until 2020, 4 of the world's 10 largest economies have come from the global south. My question is that you consider all of these 80 years as a continuous era. Why shouldn't we consider these major changes as the indications of 2 distinct eras, 2 distinct period with different features, with different situation?
You have to make a difference, I believe, between the size of economies and their degree of technological advancement. When you speak of advanced countries, it is most and above all the technological level of these societies. And so you could say India has become a large economy, but is India a technologically advanced state? No, certainly not. It's still very much a dependent state. And those countries of the global south that you mentioned, they grew in size because of the sheer size of their population, and also because, of course, I mean, it's normal that when you have such a huge population, you have a large economy. But they did not make it technologically. They are specialized in some sector, but this always existed. Imperialism always developed a few industries in the global south, taking advantage of cheap labor or of raw materials or other issues in order, but that fit within the system, in the interest in the system, without representing any challenge to the vertical structure of global relations. China is different. China, that's what I was saying. China is a country that has risen to the top technological level today. You speak artificial intelligence, you speak green energy, you speak everything that is today the technological edge. You see China there is a country in a peak position. So that's very different. And you could see the kind of development. So now, for instance, compare India with China. These are 2 countries that are comparable in size and the size of their populations, but they have followed quite different systems. The case of China has gone through a radical revolution that has changed a lot of social features in that country. Whatever, I mean, I'm not praising the kind of events that happened in China in the 50s and 60s. There were horrible stories happening then. But the fact remains is that you had a very radical change in the society. And then you had this takeoff after the 80s and starting from the 90s in particular, under a centralized command of a state that became obsessed with development, that became a very developmentalist state, and a state that started finding its legitimacy. If you take the Communist Party, this party has been seeking legitimacy in economic development, because all legitimacy in liberation war had finished its role. Whereas in India, you had the permanence of very, very archaic structures, social structures and cultural structures remaining. You had a capitalist system that went from a mild developmentalism into neoliberalism. And there you have it. You have a country, you have some sectors that have developed because they are useful to global capitalism, like outsourcing some issues from the global north into India. But overall, the country is far from being comparable to China. It's a country that is very dependent technologically and very much part of the second tier of world countries from the point of view of the level of advancement. Again, to be distinguished from the issue of the economic size of the country.
If I may, so I wanted to ask you back to your theory about neofascism. When we look at the Second World War, we see that the leftists had initiated, for example, if the united front of people constructed by the leftists, social democrats, and liberals, and all of the other who was against Nazism and fascism. But now you say that it's not possible in this time. I wanted to know more about your opinion, why it's not possible to have like this united front of all anti-fascists in these days.
I didn't say that you can't have united front of anti-fascists. I don't know to what you are referring. But no, what I said is that we are living through what I call a new age of fascism, but it's the age of neofascism. Neofascism because the form that the far right is taking today is different in form, not in content, not in ideological content, but in form. In political form is different from what you had a century ago between the First World War and the Second World War, when you had the first rise of fascism. Neo-fascism, one key difference is that old fascism theorized dictatorship, called for dictatorship as a model. Neo-fascism claimed to be democratic. But it's a completely perverted democracy, and it empties progressively. It empties democracy from its content, from its meaning, and there are, of course, other differences in the forms. That is, old fascism had paramilitary organizations. Neo-fascism today doesn't have or doesn't rely primarily on paramilitary organization. There are some, depending on which country we were speaking about. India, for instance, we were speaking of India. You have a neo-fascist regime in India, and there are paramilitary forces that make this Indian neo-fascism maybe closer to old fascism than other forms, but still. The difference is you still have elections in India. Even though they try to rig them in some way, they try to restrict the ability of the opposition forces to fight. That's what you find with neo-fascism. That's the one of the key features. So now the balance of forces, today compared to old fascism, even though old fascism had much more tragic features with Nazism and all that, but if you take globally, it clashed with the Soviet Union on the one hand and the United States and Britain on the other hand. And they finally managed to defeat the fascist axis. Today, there is no equivalent of that, and the balance of forces globally is, from that point of view, is in a sense is worse than what you had a century ago or 80 years ago, in the sense that this neo-fascism has won in the mightiest, richest and strongest state on earth, which is the United States of America. And it is prevailing in Russia. It is prevailing in India. I wouldn't put China in the same category. It's an authoritarian bureaucratic regime, but it's not a neo-fascist regime. It's something different. It's part of a tradition that goes back to the Stalinism, as it's called, in a modernized fashion. That's a different story. And you see a rise of those neo-fascist forces in all Western countries today, including Britain, where I am, where you had a week ago the largest far-right demonstration in British history. And at a time when the polls indicate that the far-right party of Farage, Reform Party so-called, is ahead of the Conservatives and the Labour, and both traditional parties. In the polls, the far right has more people declaring that they support this party than people supporting each of the two other parties. So that shows you how dangerous is the time in which we are. And of course, in fighting this, there is a need for alliances to be made, but we have to distinguish, and that's classical. It's nothing new I'm saying here. I think this was basically at the center of the debate even in the 1930s. That is a century ago. That one thing is to be in alliance with with centrist bourgeois forces, if you want, in the defense of democratic gains, and that's something that should be done. A large front in defense of democracy, and on the other hand, the understanding that to defeat neo-fascism, you have to build up a radical challenge to the system from a progressive point of view. Because neo-fascism appears and develops in the eyes of the people as a radical response to the existing system. They pretend to be, they have been called at some point the revolutionary right. I mean, their discourse is radical against the system, against the elites, against all this, and they claim, therefore, to vindicate the people. Just listen to Donald Trump every day. So to really defeat that, it's not through the likes of Macron in France or Starmer or whatever. Even if you could and you can have fronts in defense of this or that democratic gain with such forces, ultimately you need to build up a radical anti-capitalist force, a radical progressive response to neoliberalism, in order to attract. And there is the potential. There is the potential. As I said, if you look at France, if you look at Britain, if you look at the United States, even in every country, there is this potential of people who could respond favorably to radical left critique of the existing order. But you have to build up this radical left critique, and that's the big challenge, and that's why what I was saying at the beginning of our conversation, unfortunately today there is a major weakness on the left, and that's part of what is worrying in the present system. That's why I keep saying there is no room for optimism today. Absolutely no room for optimism. I can't see how anyone can be optimistic from the left. But there is room for hope. And I make a distinction. I think it's an important distinction between optimism, which is the belief that the best will happen, and hope, which is the belief that there is a potential for change, but it will not come alone. It will need to be built up. you see? So it's a potential, and this potential is a reason for hope, but nothing more.
So I understand you well that you mean that it's not possible to have alliances between the left and, for example, the centrists like Macron and in the United States, the Democratic Party and so on. So you mean that there is not capacity for...
No. Let me be clear.
I'm sorry, Gilbert, before you answer the question.
I asked a question refer to the question of Dr. Bedri.
No, but yes, let me first...
I have this question. We have two
forces in the board. Sorry. Before moving to another question, let me clarify. Just, I'm saying you can have alliances. Like, I'll give you an example. The radical left in France, in the second round of the parliamentary election 2 years ago, in the second round, they called to vote for even the centrist forces, even the Macron forces, to defeat the neo-fascist forces of Le Pen. So that's not a problem for me. That's possible. But they, at the same time, they're doing the right thing. They are building up the radical left, La France Insoumise. They are building up a radical anti-capitalist force which is fighting Macronism, because Macronism is the reason why the neo-fascists are rising. Neoliberalism is what is feeding into the development of neo-fascism. So you can have those alliances, but they are tactical alliances, whereas your strategy is to build an anti-capitalist or at the very least anti-neoliberal force.
Thank you.
Before you guys go any deeper into this subject, I know some people have raised hands. They have questions. There's going to be time by the end of the program in half an hour. So everybody in the audience could raise hands. I just want to welcome Dr. Rahnama. If he's in the room, he could join the discussion. If he's in the room, please open the video so we could see you. Dr. Rahnama, if you are in the room, you can join the discussion. If you have any questions, you can raise it right now.
Can I ask a question, Rosa?
Sure, go ahead. I do not see Dr. Rahnama.
About another subject. You have considered Iran and Brazil as countries resisting imperialism. But as you have pointed out in your articles, they have taken quite different, perhaps you can say that even opposite paths, with very different outcomes. Brazil has moved from being a heavily in-debt country to becoming the 10th largest economy in the world, while Iran remains in crisis and have steadily fallen behind. How can you classify these two policies with such a contradictory outcomes within a single anti-imperialist framework? Do these policies not originated from two opposing perspectives on the dominant global processes, and shouldn't they be categorized within two separate frameworks?
Again, I'm sorry, but I really don't see to what you refer. I never said that Brazil and Iran. I mean, maybe you are confusing with somebody else or some other text, but I've never mentioned Brazil and
you
Iran.
Have mentioned. I mean that both of them has anti-imperialist actions with some differences, and some of them has the other. So perhaps I make mistake.
No, I never wrote and never mentioned that. I didn't say that. No, if you're asking me about Brazil and Iran, I mean, first of all, they are very different countries. Brazil is inserted in the imperialist system, is no challenge to the imperialist system, and it's part of these countries that I mentioned when I said that some countries may have an economic weight because of their size and the size of their population, but they are dependent. They are in the structure of the system. They are very much in the dependent category. Iran is a different case because It is a regime that has challenged global imperialism politically without the policies or means of challenging it economically. Iran is an anomaly in the sense that the Iranian regime would not have persisted. No way it could have persisted that long without oil. And that's why I explained in my books that the oil income allows for non-rationality in economy. I mean, from the economic rationality point of view, a regime like that of Iran would have collapsed a long time ago. But because of oil, it manages to continue. You can have other irrational regimes. Libya under Gaddafi was completely irrational regime. Why could you have such a completely irrational regime for so many years? Well, because of oil again. And oil provides a source of income to the regime, whatever the regime does. And that's the key point. And so it gives a margin of autonomy to some forms of political regime that, from the point of view of capitalist rationality, can be seen as unfit to survive. And that's the case with Iran, where oil has been the fuel of the whole system and the machine. And you know this better than I know. This whole system rests on oil. The whole system of the Pasdaran and the Bonyats and all this structure that, this economic empire, this Khomeiniist kind of economic empire within Iran, which is ruling the country, this could not exist without oil. It is fed by oil money, basically. So that's a different story. I mean, Iran and Brazil are very different countries. They can't be put in the same category.
Back to the question about the allies. In Brazil, you see that Working Party and Lula, to fight against Jair Bolsonaro, had been more near to the centrists in the recent election and the recent period of. How do you think about this political tactic of Lula and Working Party in Brazil?
Well, the Workers' Party in Brazil is a sad illustration of some of the well-known diseases of bureaucracy, of trade union bureaucracy. The Workers' Party has come out from a trade union movement, but a trade union movement which became very big and which got bureaucratized. And this bureaucratization went along with corruption. And this corruption perverted the system very much. And the system married with capitalism. You had a workers' movement who actually worked hand in hand with capitalism, with capitalist parties. And that allowed actually for a far right to develop, represented by Bolsonaro, a far right rejecting the system, rejecting the corruption, and the Workers' Party becoming the symbol of the system and corruption. And that's very unfortunate. That's what you had. And one can fear, with Lula back in power and this in alliance with the right-wing capitalist forces, you can fear that you'll have a repeat of the same. That is, the far right will surge again. I'm afraid that's what I fear very much happening in Brazil.
Thank you.
I believe Dr. Rahma is in the room. If you are in the room, please open the video.
Hello? Do you hear me?
We can hear. Yes, we can hear you.
Sorry, I'm out of town, I've been disconnected and I have not been able to listen completely to Professor Achcar. Gilbert, great to hear from you. I hope if I'm disconnected, because I'm out of town, It's great to hear from you. There are several points raised here. I mean, I remember that after the Iranian Revolution, you were among the first to warn everybody about the rise of religious fundamentalism and Islamic fundamentalism. I think you were way ahead of all of us at that time. And now, talking of the present moment, as I said, unfortunately, I could not hear what you were saying, parts and parcels of it. But I can see that there were discussions about some alliances at the global level now. I mean, first of all, one point about global south and global north, which I have always problem with this notification, because in the north we have south, in the south we have north, I mean, the capitalist class and the working class in both, and then there are different alliances. I have problem with that. The main problem, I believe, is that now not only the left is confronted with capital, imperialism, and others, but also with religious fundamentalisms at all levels. And the problem is that the left is so divided and so weak in all of these countries. The main question is that really what can be done to confront this assault of the right wing, both religious and secular. And then if I'm cat again, then I will try to ask more. Yeah.
Yeah, Saeed. Very nice hearing your voice, even if it would have been even better to see you, but I understand. Thank you for your remarks. Look, global north and global south, they would be a problem if one uses them as meaning the global south against the global north. That's not at all the way I use that. I'm using them as categories to point to the division of the world into dominant countries and dominated countries. Of course, you have capitalism on both sides, you have workers on both sides, you have everything on both sides. But one side is dominant, more advanced economically and technologically, and the other side is dominated. And we were speaking of the fact that only very few countries of the global south, in that sense, managed to climb up the ladder, either because they were helped by the global north, by the center of world imperialism, by the United States, for strategic reasons, and that's the case of South Korea and Taiwan, or because it worked within the system, but from a very different perspective, which is the case of China. It worked within the world market, but from a very different, with a different system and from a different perspective. Anyway, to the question of what is to be done, it would be presumptuous from me, or actually anyone, to pretend that they have the recipe. We know what is to be done in general terms, as we were speaking with just before, with on the issue of alliances and the kind of alliances. And when I said that what is needed is to build new radical anti-neoliberal or anti-capitalist forces, that's the best way to fight neofascism. But this is very general. Beyond that, it's the only general issue that I can point to is the need to absorb and overcome the lessons of, or the legacy of, the 20th century. The 20th century is left. And here the issue of democracy is decisive. One big problem in the new left experiences that you see rising here and there is that many of them are still reproducing the pattern of the 20th century left of centralization, bureaucratic maneuvers behind the scenes and the rest. Whereas today, the new generations, and you can see that every time you've had a real rise of the young people, led by young people, you see that they are very much for democratic, horizontal, non-centralist forms of organization, which are enabled by the new technology. And I keep saying that from a vulgar materialist perspective, very basic, but you can't have the same form of organization with the time of the print shop that had to be underground and the time of the internet. You have completely different technologies, and therefore the kind of organization you can build around these technologies can be extremely different. And that's for me a key point. When I see the problems today in the left. If you take France, you have a problem with what is called caudillism, with the central role of one person, the leader of La France Insoumise, and a functioning of the movement which is not democratic at all. Now, it has been working until now as a kind of populist, left-wing populist movement, but the seeds of defeat are there because of the lack of democracy and democratic organization. If you take Britain, the Corbyn experience, I think this lack of democracy in its form of organization was crucial in its initial defeat, and now it is. I was saying that before you come, but there has been this call to launch a new left party that was very popular. In a few days, you had 800,000 people subscribing to that, and suddenly they started fighting. I mean, those who launched this started fighting between themselves, and it appeared that there were some very bad clique functioning behind the scenes. So that's a key problem. Whereas, I mean, you can look at other movements like some mass movements that appeared in recent times and where much more democratic and horizontal. Black Lives Matter, for instance, in the United States, which was absolutely huge, worked as a horizontal democratic organization with using the modern technology in coordinating. So that's where I think there is a big problem that needs to be solved. To build a new radical left at the global level, you need a renewal of the critique of capitalism, modernization of that critique, including all the contributions that developed over the last decades, whether regarding gender, whether regarding, of course, environment, ecology, and the rest. You have to bring all this, but you have also to absorb, as I said, the lessons of the defeat and the severe defeat of the left in the 20th century, and look forward to new forms of organization that are much more democratic than what existed before, which is the way I think, to be able to build a mass movement in today's world.
This is great. Can I talk now?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. Now, that's great, Gilbert. I totally agree with you. You know, these are the same problems that we are discussing within the left in Iran, you know. I mean, the whole spectrum of the left that we discuss, you know, on the right side of the left, you know, we have got elements who try to ally themselves with the liberals within the regime, if we have any of those, you know. And on the far left, we have organizations, you know, parties that continue to say that they want immediately move towards socialism, you know, at the time, exactly using the same notions, you know, the dictatorship of proletariat and others. That's why, you know, the Iranian left has been really left out of the movement. And as you know, I mean, Iran has experienced several major movements, women's movement, I mean, the latest woman life freedom and others. Now, the main issue is that exactly what type of organizations, what type of socialism we are going to propagate, and all of these are the main issues that really we are confronted. And of course, at the global level, we see how the far right is moving, and it's so dangerous. We have never, I think, been in such a disastrous situation as we are now.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Now, of course, we have to draw a clear distinction between countries where you have political democracy, like the United States, until now. It's shrinking more and more, but there is still the democratic space, or Western Europe or other such countries, and countries like Iran, where you have a very repressive regime. And therefore, of course, we cannot speak of the same forms of organization everywhere. Organization is to be adapted to the conditions of each country. But there is a difference between the political organization that you can build as a permanent organization in a country like Iran, which has to be underground, which has actually to work in ways that are still similar to what you had in Tsarist Russia a century ago, or over a century ago, and the mass movement. And you mentioned women life freedom. These mass eruptions, when you have them, when they happen, as you had with what was called the Arab Spring, those mass eruptions of that we have seen in countries like Egypt, Tunisia, Syria, even at the beginning, other countries, you can see here that even in these repressive countries, when you have a mass eruption, it uses the new technologies, and it is quite horizontal in its way of functioning. But you still need, because of the repressive conditions, you still need to be able to build a network that could play a role in pushing things forward when you have the opportunity. And that of course, easier said than done, especially in a country like Iran. So that is what is making the thing difficult. Is that regime is so repressive, so pervasive, so infiltrated in society. It's not, a regime disconnected from society. It has, as you know very well, it has tentacles within society. Okay. And therefore it is, in a sense, quite totalitarian in its control of things. And it is very difficult to be able to build a coordination, a network, an underground network and coordination in the face of that. But the only thing is that when you have eruptions like you had, to try to advance in this direction, I would not hide to you the fact that I can't be optimistic. I think that some regimes, and the regime in Iran is part of that, will not leave the scene peacefully. They will not, collapse. We will not. I can't see the repeat of the fall of the Shah in 1979. I can't see the present regime collapsing in the same way, almost peacefully. I mean, the 79 revolution was very peaceful compared to what of some of the upheavals that you have seen in other countries. So this regime, a difference with the Shah regime, this regime has its social base based on the use of oil and the rest in a much stronger and also ideologically cemented way due to the use or exploitation of religion and the rest. And that makes it a very formidable enemy. It is very, very difficult task. But I mean, we have seen a succession of uprisings or upheavals since 2018 in Iran on social, economic issues, on the women issue and the rest. So there is a new generation. There are, again, here I'm saying the difference between optimism and hope. I cannot be optimistic about a country like Iran or about the world, actually. But there are reasons for hope in the build-up of a potential. But one shouldn't have illusions about the fact that it will be easy. No, it won't be easy. It's clear. I think to everybody here, I mean, I would be surprised if anyone believes that it will be easy to overthrow such a regime.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I share your pessimism, and of course, lots of things to be said, but I'm sure that time is over now, and it's great to see you and talk with you.
Thank you so much. I would like to know if Ali Reza and Mehdi have any more questions. If you guys don't, I'm going to ask a question. Do you think just socialism must be a global project, or it could happen nationally? And what is the roadmap for it? And you already mentioned it wasn't successful in Soviet Union. So what should socialism do to be successful in any country?
Yes, thank you. Well, definitely, I think socialism, by definition, from the very early socialist, I mean, views, the build-up of the first elaboration of socialist views, it was meant to be internationalist. It was meant to be something for the human species, if I could say, for the human race, for humanity, and something to be built at a global level. It's a full perversion of the original socialist perspective to get into narrow nationalist interpretations of it. Now, at the same time, and this is again a lesson that was very much confirmed by the 20th century. But actually, the socialist forces in the late 19th century were more advanced than what you had later, in the sense of understanding the close relation of socialism with democracy. And there is no possible socialism, there is no possible advancement towards socialism without democracy, without radical democracy. And so I was saying that the socialist movement of the late 19th century, early 20th century had more understanding of that than what happened later under the influence of the Soviet Union in particular, where a model which is very non-democratic, anti-democratic, what is called, what usually is referred to as Stalinism, prevailed and infected all the left, including, I should say, including anti-Stalinist left, were actually very much infected by a model that was very centralist and authoritarian. And that is part of the reason of the collapse and the failure of all these experiences. So socialism, yes, has to be fought for globally, internationally, and has to be very narrowly, inseparably linked to democracy and radical democracy. That's what is needed. And at the same time, and I will get back to Iran on this, because we don't, I mean, no country is is on a different planet. We are all on the same planet. And that's why, if you look at things just at the level of Iran only, then, well, you could speak of pessimism. Said said pessimism. I didn't want to use the term. I just said I'm not optimistic. But if you look at things globally, then hope is stronger also, because you know that if ever there is some reversal in the tide, today the tide is to the right wing. If there is, and we still hope that will be a reversal of the tide and the rise of new radical democratic forces, if you have further explosions here and there, things may change, and including in other, I mean, in a country like Iran and the rest. So it's not isolated from the rest of the world. It is linked. It is connected in all the senses of the term connected. It is connected to the rest of the world. People in Iran see and know what is happening outside. This is the new technologies. There is no more this possibility that you had in the past of closing completely the country and with people only seeing what is happening there. I mean, this might still be the case in North Korea, but that's the really extreme case in the world. Iran, with the size of Iran, the technology and the rest, is not able to do that. So these are factors of hope. There are factors of hope in the sense that there is an interaction between the local, the national, and the international, which is why also we have to fight. We have each one in the country where they are. We have to be part of the fight for change, because it affects the balance of power internationally and globally, and this will affect even the country of origin of people who are migrant or refugees or political refugees in other countries.
Thank you so much. If there is no more questions, I ask audience to raise the questions. Hamid, you raised your hand a long time ago. Please go ahead. Let me just.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Gilbert, to taking my question. I'm sorry I cannot open my. Oh, I opened my video. Okay. My question is that, or maybe that's a new subject. At this time, it sounds that we are facing with a new situation between right and left, which is totally different from the old one. Right now, capitalism, it sounds that there is no major issue, even on the left side. All the major countries in the world, they are running their economy based on capitalism. And even those countries we are considered left, they are more right in the economy than the other countries. In Iran, there is mafia economy and crony economy, crony capitalism. In the Russia, the same way. In the China, we see that even the sign of the slavery, but we consider them left. Why? Because they are fighting with the United States. But it sounds that right now we are facing mostly between left and right based on the, let's say, the moral and ethical value. At least in the United States, it's the same. That's my question, that I see that, and the fascism you are talking about. You explain a little bit or define the fascism in the world. But for example, if you go to the Iran, they consider 14 signs for the fascism in the world. All in the 14th sign, which means that the system is fascist. All of them happens in Iran. And I'm sure that the same thing happens in the Russia, the same thing happens in the China, more or less, even in the Vietnam. Now, what we are facing with that, for example, the left should focus mostly on the environmental issue, focus on the, for example, right of the gays, or lesbian, or it's very, very confusing for me that what we are talking about when we're talking about the fascism, where is not fascism in the world? In which country you cannot see that? And if you go to the other side, to the Latin American country, right now they're just swinging between left and right, left and right, left and right, and nobody has a solution for them. And even if you go to the other capitalistic country, you can see at least part of economy is socialistic. For example, in the United States, the system in the Los Angeles school system is run by the local government, the local city government. Although there is that private schooling here. So that was the reason I'm really confusing. About 10 years, 20 years ago, I was very straightforward on every issue. But right now, really, really, I'm confused that do we have to redefine the left and right at this situation? Thank you so much. Hopefully I'm clear.
Yes, you are. Thank you. I fully understand what you mean, but I think right and left must remain to be defined by two factors. The attitude towards capitalism, and the other factor is a set of values, of progressive values. They should be both there to define something as left, or a regime as left, or a political force as left. Anti-capitalism or alone, and even less so anti-imperialism, even anti-imperialism is less so. Why? Because some people confuse anti-imperialism with anti-West. Okay, Iran is an anti-Western country. It's not an anti-imperialist country. I mean, the mullahs never say imperialism. They don't use the term. It's the great Satan. It's whatever. They have different categories. They are not anti-imperialists. That's a concept that they don't have. But even, anti-capitalist forces, if you have an anti-capitalist force that is not subscribing to the values, the traditional values of the left, that is everything that goes into human emancipation and equality. And that is whether gender, whether political, whether whatever level you are taking it, and freedom and democracy. These are values, classical values of what should be regarded as left. So it's only when you have a combination of both that you have really left. If you have only anti-capitalism and without the rest, I don't see that as left. The regime that you had in Russia under Stalin, or in Cambodia, in Kampuchea under the Pol Pot, these are not left-wing, in my view. They are non-capitalist, they are bureaucratic systems, they are different type of systems, but they don't represent what I would categorize as left in the full sense of the term. So from that angle, you don't have, probably the closest state on earth today to that is close to these issues, just closest, but it's doesn't fit the description, is maybe Cuba, where you still have some social gains and you still have some progressive features in the regime, but they are eroded more and more. And part of the reason is, of course, the heavy pressure of the United States in strangulating this country, this island. But aside from that, I can't see in today's world any really left-wing inspiring regime or state anywhere. So yes, the issue is not replacing anti-capitalism with moral, ethical values. I think the issue is combining the two. And it's only with the combination of the two, anti-capitalism or the fight on social economic issues against neoliberalism for workers' rights, working class interest, popular interest, the fight for these issues, combined with the values of democracy, equality, emancipation, including gender emancipation. It's the combination of these two which makes the full sense of left, if you want, of progressiveness, right? And any of these two without the other remains limited or even contradictory. So if you have, for instance, feminist but pro-capitalist, the limitations of that are very, very narrow. So again, we have to keep as a goal and concept the combination of the two in the definition of progressiveness, of what we mean by real progressive forces, combining these two aspects.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm going to ask the audience if they have any questions, and if it's in Farsi, we can translate. حتما. دوستان عزیزی که در اتاق هستن اگر سوال دارید سوالتون رو میتونید به فارسی هم طرح بکنید، به انگلیسی ترجمه خواهد شد. مهدی بفرمایید.
Senator, what is your view on the future of a struggle against neo-fascist forces? What will be the outcome of this battle? And beside of it, in the areas that you mentioned as reasons why China and Russia cannot be considered fully imperial powers, as same as USA, is it possible for these two countries to advance and acquire those elements? And what about Europe?
Okay, well, Russia is a neo-fascist regime. Russia is an imperialist country. It's a capitalist country, full and full. I mean, there's no possible doubt about that. I mean, the fact of being anti-West does not mean being anti-imperialist. You can have another imperialism. Russia is an imperialist country. And neo-fascism in the form of the United States, in the form of the Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban, in the form of others, have affinities with the Russian regime. Putin is seen as a model by most of the neo-fascist forces in the world. China again is a different issue. If you look at the comparison between China on the one hand and Russia and the United States on the other, you will see that both Russia and the United States are in the business of projecting their military power all the time abroad. China has not done this yet. It might turn into that at some point. It is a bureaucratic capitalist system, but it's not a country or a state that I would today, at this point, define as imperialist. It can mutate in the future, even in the near future, but until now it hasn't. It hasn't been projecting its power outside into controlling other countries like others did. It tries economically, of course, to build bridges, but that's not the same kind of relation with the rest of the world than you have in the case of the United States or even Russia for that matter. So these are matters of definition anyway. But global, I mean, I go back to your the first issue that you raised. Well, I think that this neo-fascist age in which we are today can fall in the short or medium term, can fall mostly by its own mistakes, its own deficiencies. like Trump, for instance. I'll give you an example. Trump is so clumsy and is ruling in such a crazy manner that this may, it's a potential, may backlash, this may backfire and lead to a defeat of Trumpism. I hope so. We'll see next year with the election. And that's why also he's trying to rig the system, to change the electoral rules and all that in order to guarantee the permanence of his crowd. So you can hope and expect that his the results of his crazy policies, the economic and social results, are such that they will backfire and lead to the defeat of what he represents. But for now, until now, I can't see in a force that is able to defeat the neo-fascist frontally by its own build-up as a force. So in the short and medium term, what in the very foreseeable future, what you can hope for mostly is a defeat of neo-fascism due to its own contradictions. It will take more time to see the rise of forces that are able to defeat neo-fascism by their own force, by their own strengths, and by attracting more popular support than the neo-fascists. That we hope will happen, but it's a hope. There is absolutely no certainty about that. That's why, for the time being, we are witnessing what is happening in the hope that their policies become such a failure that they get out of the scene. And you can see that. I mean, Milei in Argentina can be beaten because his policies are backfiring. We hope Trump gets the same. You can hope that these kinds of neo-fascist experiences will get defeated by their own economic and social failures. That's for now. This is more likely than the rise of a counterweight on the left, which we hope will come at some point, but you can't bet on it in the very near future.
Thank you so much. Kobe has a question and he raised his hands. Please, Kobe, go ahead.
Hello. First of all, thank you very much for the very, very interesting lecture and the answers and the questions. I'm really happy to be here. Second, I'm going to ask two questions. I'll try to keep it as short as possible. One is, as an unregenerate leftist, I always take issue with the word woke and wokeism. I think it's very important. As anyone on the left, we thrive, we fight for equal rights, but at the same time, I think the whole cultural, what is defined as cultural left today, with like I'd be being classified with the likes of Biden and Kamala Harris, they're not even center right. I think the whole, the way that it is phrased with the woke and wokeism and how it is phrased in US specifically, and even in the, in the rest of the West, how do you react to that? How do we stand by LGBTQ rights, gay rights, women's rights, and not to be classified, not to be a part of that struggle, which I don't think it is a leftist struggle. I think it's a rightist struggle. I think what people, the quote unquote woke people in Los Angeles, are a bunch of, rich kids who are looking to sell more Netflix product or something. And the second question, I'm going to, again, make it really quick, is that one of the things that globalism did was to eradicate the working class from countries that it was politically dangerous, like the US, like the UK and other countries. So they basically, eradicated their working class and then outsource them to Bangladesh or to Vietnam or to, at the time, China. Why? Because there the working class didn't have enough rights. There they could be more easily suppressed. But now you have people specifically again in US with the Trump who wants to quote unquote bring the working class and the production back to US. I highly doubt with the way he's approaching this, he's going to succeed. But to the degree to which he is going to succeed, and so if he succeeds to one degree or another, we are going to have a new working class in Western countries with the anti-immigration and everything. Do you see this hopefully, shaping new working class as a potential source of political, actions, and if they can they? If there is, again, a production factory-based working class in countries like US, do you see them being able to affect the politics, and policies there? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I start with your second issue on the working class. I think that's one of the issues where I can see or foresee a failure of the Trumpian model, because this is a very nationalist, narrow-minded capitalist doctrine that he has, which does not make sense from the capitalist point of view, makes little sense. His whole trade war, tariffs, and all that, his whole narrow nationalism about the working class, as you mentioned, which is very ethno-nationalist, like this dismissal of South Korean workers recently, which was, really amazingly stupid from a capitalist perspective, what he has been doing. Trying to be demagogic and populist, and trying to please the American working class as appearing as championing them. But at the end of the day, he is sabotaging the economic benefits upon which they have from which they have benefited over the years. He is sabotaging the way the United States has been exploiting the rest of the world and living far beyond its means. He doesn't understand that, very stupidly. He is very narrow-minded, and his economic views are very antiquated, actually, and a lot of economists would point to that. From the point of view of capitalism, of capitalist economics. So I think that on this level, that's one of the reasons for hope, actually, because he cannot deliver. His policies are doomed to fail. There is no way you can recreate and bring back to the United States some of the industries that went abroad because of the comparative advantage, to put it in Adam Smith's very basic early capitalist doctrine terms. And what he is doing will prove economically not viable. And that's where I can see a self-defeating feature in Trumpism. Now, about the first issue that you raised, wokeism and the rest, that's indeed a real problem, because that's one perversion of neoliberalism. Neoliberalism has developed ideologically a kind of counterweight to class conscience in identity politics. It's the old divide and rule, but it has been taken by modern capitalism to neoliberalism to new stages by putting emphasis on different categories, and you have a use of identity politics, as they are called, against class conscious, against social economic joint identity. You know, identity politics is about dividing the people on the basis of different identity features, whereas an anti-capitalist perspective is about unifying the people across all these diversities into a single anti-capitalist force. So I think the way out of this is, again, a combination. It's not by rejecting those elements of identity politics, but by stressing the need for what some people call intersectionality, which means to bring them along a class perspective, combine them with a class perspective. So that's what I was saying. If you have just like feminism, but pro-capitalist or without challenging capitalism, this feminism will be absorbed and recuperated by capitalism very easily. It can become a kind of capitalist ideology. So you have to combine the understanding that the patriarchal system and the social economic exploitative system are combined. They are very narrowly linked, and to fight against one without fighting against the other, and that goes both ways, is doomed to fail. So that's the key issue, I would say. Yeah. So that is. We should not, the reaction to what you call wokeism or identity politics should not be a rejection of those elements that you have there of emancipation. The reaction should be the stress on the need to combine all this with the class perspective, the anti-capitalist perspective.
There is one more question. That's going to be the last questions, and you're going to have time to conclude your lecture if you would like. محمود عزیز بفرمایید. مایکتون بسته است، اگه ممکنه مایکتون رو باز کنید.
I'm sorry. Thank you.
بفرمایید، صداتون میاد. بفرمایید. صداتون هست، بفرمایید.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Gilbert, for your enlightening presentation. What has been confusing to me is the conflict between different factions of the left all over the world, let alone within a country. I know it's a difficult question, but what is the suggestion first for the left to do a cleaning house before any upheaval that all expect to happen? In my mind, even if an upheaval from the working class starts, it's not clear who is going to be the leader among all these different factions. This is one big issue, I think, before anything else that we can spend our mind and our thoughts on. I know it's a difficult question. The other question that I have, or maybe a comment, is that all these different factions start from the same premise, from the same origin, yet they go in different directions. However, what I see in the young generation is a desire to go in that direction. And the left factions probably have a duty for educating the young generation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I think I pointed to what I believe is the answer to your first remark. And this is the issue of democracy. I mean, of course, there are different groups of the left, there are different views, and anti-capitalism can represent or can be shared by very different political views on tactics, on strategy, on different issues, on the solutions that should be defended, the demands that should be raised, a lot of things. But the key point remains precisely if you want to build a left-wing movement that can represent the future, it has to be radically democratic. It has to be very democratic in the sense also that when you build an organization, it cannot be a centralized organization where the leadership becomes permanent. Part of radical democracy is the ability to change at every point, to change and to decide in the most democratic manner. And new technology, the internet and the rest, makes that much easier, makes that possible. I mean, it might have been very difficult to achieve. That's why anarchism could not materialize in the past. But nowadays, with the modern technologies and all that, you can really have this kind of horizontal, very democratic form of organization. That's what should be fought for within the left as a general rule against all those tendencies to leader cult and permanent leadership and the rest. I mean, if groups want to organize with their own views, that's their problem, that's their right. But the movement as such, the movement should remain radically democratic, and no leadership should be accepted at the head of the movement that try to suppress other forces. That's one of the reasons, by the way, in my view, of the failure of the Bolshevik experience. But because when they came to power, they suppressed even the other left-wing currents, and that was what laid the ground for the Stalinist degeneration that happened quickly after. So this principle of democracy among anti-capitalist forces, I think, is absolutely essential. That's a key lesson of the failure of the 20th century left. As for the old and the young, to be frank, I think today the young have more to teach the old than the reverse, because of this great shift in societies, a great shift in technologies, great shift in everything. The young people are creating new forms. I give you one example of a country that I studied closely, which is Sudan. Sudan had you had the old left, of which a key part was a communist party that is very fossilized, very ossified, quite Stalinist. But then you had the development of a youth movement which has been really the spearhead of the Sudanese popular movement until you had this civil war between two fractions of the armed forces. That was a disaster. But until then, you had a movement called resistance committees, formed of tens of thousands of young people, spread across the country, creating committees in each neighborhood, each place, of hundreds of members in each place, refusing centralism, refusing to have any central leadership, coordinating through Facebook and other technologies. And they were able to create a fantastically strong movement and to lead the popular resistance to the military for quite a long time, until you had this very unfortunate explosion of the country due to the clash between the armed forces, among the armed forces themselves. That's very peculiar, very specific. We haven't seen this scenario in previous revolutionary uprisings. So I think we have to, the older people have to look closely to what the young are doing, those new experiences, and try to learn from that, and maybe then bring something to the young, but by combining whatever we can draw from the past, from the lessons, including the failures. That's very important to understand and draw the conclusion, the lessons of the failures, the tragic failures of the 20th century, bring that into the basket with the young people's imaginative, creative new forms of organization. And well, this combination, I think, is the recipe for a real build-up of a new movement, a new progressive radical movement.
Thank you so much. If you have any conclusion you want to, in 2 minutes, no?
No, I think that was a conclusion in some way.
Thank you so much for the time and for accepting our invitation and sharing your thoughts with us. I enjoyed the lecture a lot. And I want to thank Mehdi Fattahpour, Ali Reza Behtoui, and Saeed Rahnama for joining us and having their thoughts and sharing their thoughts and questions with us. I would love if you give us more opportunities for the next seminars also. Sure. I want to thank all the audience in the Zoom and in YouTube to follow us. And the video is going to be in Green Left Think Tank room soon. Everybody can listen to it, watch it, and share it with their friends. Until next seminar, I wish you healthiest and happiest life.
And thank you very much, and the very best wishes to you all and to all of us also as people who are hoping for a better future for this world. Thank you very much.
Thank you.